Okay, so in the high-stakes world of global trade, Mexico just made a massive move. And believe me, everyone is talking about it. Today, we're going to break down what this new trade wall is all about and what it really means for the global economy. So let's just get right to it. Here's the big question. Why would Mexico, a country that has practically built its modern economy on open trade, suddenly decide to start a trade fight with some of Asia's biggest players? Well, as you're about to see, this is way more than just an economic squabble. It's a calculated, high-stakes geopolitical gamble. All right, so before we can really dig into the why, we first have to get a crystal clear picture of the what. So let's break down the details of Mexico's new trade policy. And the headline here is a real doozy. Mexico is slapping tariffs of up to 50% on a whole range of imports from key Asian countries. Now, let me be clear. This isn't some minor tweak. This is a fundamental change in their trade strategy, and it's set to cause some major waves starting in 2026. And these tariffs are incredibly precise, almost like they were surgically targeted. Just look at this list. We're talking about China's auto sector, India's massive textile industry, South Korean steel. This is a very intentional strike aimed right at the economic heart of these countries' biggest export machines. And this didn't just happen overnight. What's really interesting is that an even tougher version of this bill was actually shot down earlier this year. The one that finally made it through is a compromise, the result of some pretty intense political wheeling and dealing to get it across the finish line. Okay, so that's the what. But the real story, the juicy part, is the why. Officially, Mexico is telling a story of two Ps: protect and profit. They say this is all about shielding their own industries while giving their national budget a nice little boost. So on one hand, it's about defending local businesses and jobs from a flood of cheaper imports from Asia. Makes sense. But on the other hand, it's also a pretty clever way to raise a ton of cash to help close the country's fiscal deficit. That gap between what the government spends and what it brings in. And when I say a ton of cash, I mean it. The government is projecting this will bring in an extra $3.76 billion in revenue next year alone. Now that is a massive incentive, and it helps you understand the political muscle behind getting this policy passed. What's really telling here is that even the opposition party gets the logic. Senator Mario Vasquez from the PAN party had some other problems with the bill, but even he admitted that, hey, these tariffs could be a lifeline for Mexican jobs that are getting hammered by Chinese competition. Now, the ruling party, they're framing this as a brilliant strategic move. Senator Emmanuel Reyes argues that it's not just some simple cash grab. No, he says it's about actively guiding the entire economy to protect Mexico's industrial backbone for the long haul. But if you think this story ends with domestic politics, you're missing the biggest piece of the puzzle. To really get what's going on, we have to zoom out and look at the giant game of geopolitical chess being played with its neighbor to the north, the United States. You see, the timing on this is everything. It is absolutely no coincidence that these tariffs are coming just before that crucial 2026 review of the USMCA, the huge trade deal between the US, Mexico, and Canada. This is basically Mexico's way of sending a clear signal to Washington that they're on the same team, especially as the US continues its push for nearshoring supply chains away from Asia. So here's how that whole strategic play breaks down. For years now, the U.S. has been getting pretty loud about its concerns over Chinese goods flowing through Mexico into the American market. So what does Mexico do? They respond by raising tariffs on those very goods. This move directly addresses Washington's concerns and puts Mexico in a much, much stronger negotiating position for those upcoming USMCA talks. It's a textbook strategic alignment. But of course, a move this big is never simple. It's bound to create some waves. So in our final section, let's talk about the potential ripple effects, the risks, and who might ultimately end up paying the price for all this. And the most immediate risk, as Senator Vasquez points out once again, is that somebody has to pay for these tariffs. And that somebody is almost always the consumer. That means higher prices on all sorts of things, from car parts to clothing for the average family in Mexico. And the headaches don't stop there. Beyond hitting consumers in the wallet, Mexico is also facing backlash from its own business community. And on the world stage, well, you can bet this is creating some pretty tense relationships with major Asian partners like China and India, injecting a whole new level of uncertainty into global trade. So when you boil it all down, Mexico is walking a very thin tightrope here. They're trying to pull off this incredible balancing act.
protecting their home turf and aligning with the U.S. on one side, while risking serious inflation and major diplomatic blowback on the other.
Which brings us to the final billion-dollar question. Is this a brilliant strategic play to secure Mexico's future inside a stronger North American trade bloc, or is it a reckless economic gamble that could have massive consequences for its own citizens and the rest of the world?